be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story.
F-side's back and just wants to pick up a natural ching. Up in the means, hella skirt.
A rapper, gang member and alleged gunman. What the police knew about Chris Kaba before he was shot dead. He'd allegedly carried out his own gun attack just days earlier. One of the armed team involved on the night he died tells us the trial of a colleague has put the public at risk.
It is actually the public who will suffer from this. The public are less safe when we create a culture where our police officers are neither valued nor treated fairly.
Also tonight, in the bag, the prisoners praising the government's early release scheme as we see the reality of life inside the country's crowded jails. Donald Trump's election campaign attacks what it calls far-left Labour, accusing Sir Keir Starmer's party of trying to help Kamala Harris win the White House. Why fame was no defense against the alleged crimes of Mohammed Al-Fayed. We speak to Bianca Gascoigne, the daughter of Paul. Putting the cheer back into the King's Royal Tour of Australia as both he and Queen Camilla bid the country goodbye. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. The jury who yesterday acquitted a police marksman of murder didn't know the full background of the man he killed. Tonight, we can report on the evidence police held on Chris Kaba, that he was the suspected gunman in a nightclub shooting and, they believed, a core member of a dangerous South London criminal gang. The officer, though, who shot him didn't know he was behind the wheel. A former colleague of Martyn Blake told us he had been acting entirely in good faith and that it would be the public that would suffer from any doubts among armed police. This report from our crime correspondent Martyn Brun begins with the shooting in a nightclub just days before Chris Kaba was killed.
Minutes before the shooting, on their way into the nightclub, the red arrow shows the victim. The blue arrow is the alleged gunman Chris Kaba. It was the week before Kaba's death. In the packed bar, Kaba pushes his way through the crowds towards the victim. He opens fire. The victim, hit in the leg, manages to run. Chris Kaba calmly puts the gun in his bag and, in the chaos, strides out. Only then does he start to run, chasing the victim and shooting him a second time. In the wake of the shooting, the nightclub was closed down.
If he'd lived, Chris Kaba would have been charged with attempted murder for the shooting here. And police were also planning to put a gang injunction on him to restrict his activities as someone involved in gang violence.
Chris Kaba was shot dead by a police marksman 6 days later.
Standing by for strikes, stand by, stand by.
He was driving a vehicle linked to a shooting the night before. The firearms officer, Martyn Blake, was cleared of murder. His acquittal prompted much criticism of the decision to charge the officer, not least from a colleague of his who was there on the night.
Martyn was acting entirely in good faith in order to protect his colleagues and, in doing so, more broadly to protect members of the public. So I think for many firearms officers, it's a confusing situation they find themselves in, that it's actually the public who will suffer from this. The public are less safe when we create a culture where our police officers are neither valued nor treated fairly. And I think for all of us within the policing community particularly, but for those members of the public who have an interest in this too, I think we should all be very concerned.
And in a statement, the Met Police Federation criticised the police watchdog, the IOPC. It remains a matter of grave concern, said the Federation, that investigations into the most serious, complex and dynamic operational scenarios such as this are carried out by those who seemingly have little or no experience of policing. The Met Commissioner has called for more legal protection for officers who use lethal force. Not everyone agrees.
I'm not in favour of there being a different justice system for the police. It's been suggested today by some people that we should have a sort of court-martial system. Our police officers are not soldiers. They're citizens in uniform, as we've always believed. They're subject to the same law as us, and I think that should be the situation. Otherwise, I think there's a real risk if there was a special system of justice for police officers who'd shot people. That would strongly weaken, very much weaken public confidence.
Details of Chris Kaba's past had been kept from the jury, but revealed the day after the verdict.
Little bro, F-side's back and just wants to pick up a knife and ching.
This was Kaba, his rap name Mad Itch, said to be a core member of the 6-7 gang in South London and allegedly its principal gunman. His family had hoped to keep details of his gang connections hidden until a potential inquest. They did not respond to the revelations.
And Martyn Brun is in New Scotland Yard for us tonight. Martyn, many people watching will be surprised that the jury in the case weren't told about Chris Kaba's background, but what difference might knowing it have made?
Well, all of his background was the subject of prolonged legal argument before the trial. The defence wanted the jury to be told, the prosecution didn't want them to be told, and the judge agreed with the prosecution. He said it wasn't relevant to the issues in the trial. Now, the defence wanted the jury to know all about Chris Kaba's background, and you can see why, because if they had known that he had these gangland links and previous convictions. They may well have given the defence the advantage by being sympathetic to the officer who fired the fatal shot, Martyn Blake. In the end, of course, the officer didn't need all that background, because the jury agreed with the officer that he had fired that shot because he was worried about the way the car was moving backwards and forwards and it was the car that posed the threat to his other officers and prompted him to shoot. Nothing that he knew about Chris Kaba, because the officers didn't know that Chris Kaba was the driver of the car. One other thing tonight, Martyn Blake could still theoretically face disciplinary action under the code of practice that affects police officers, even though he's been acquitted by a jury of the murder charge. The IOPC, the police watchdog, which did the investigation, had at one point recommended that he be put on a gross misconduct charge. Now, the IOPC hasn't said anything in the wake of this not guilty verdict in the criminal trial. It may be waiting to see whether any evidence emerged during that trial that might prompt a gross negligence, gross misconduct charge. But they haven't said. There's nothing on their website to indicate, so we'll have to wait and see what the IOPC decides.
Martyn Brunt with the latest from New Scotland Yard. Martyn, thank you. You might not be surprised to hear that one prisoner released today told us the mood inside his jail was positive. Everyone is going home, he said, as he left part of the government's latest prisoner release scheme. Well, as of this week, the prison population in England and Wales was more than 87,000, leaving fewer than 2,000 spaces free. Today, about 1,100 inmates were released early to free up more cells and bunks. The Justice Secretary has also announced a review into sentencing, which will look at tougher punishments for offenders outside of prison, more advanced technology to better monitor offenders in home detention, and longer sentences for prolific offenders, forcing them to engage with rehabilitation on the inside. Our correspondent, Molly Malone, saw the pressure inside one prison for herself.
HMP Ford in Sussex, releasing inmates early in order to free up space across an overcrowded prison estate. This man was one of 1,100 freed today. He was serving time for drug offences and is determined not to go back.
What's the mood inside jail?
Well, it's a positive mood, yeah. Everyone's going home, so everyone's happy.
Are you confident you're going to stay out?
I'm 100% staying out.
Yeah.
He'd been released after serving 40% of his sentence.
It should be 20%. I think people should be in prison for less time, a lot less time.
Why do you think that?
Because they want to go home.
The people freed early today were sentenced to more than 5 years, longer jail terms than those released last month.
Do you think it's right that people are being let out early?
Well, if it helps the situation, then yeah.
The government think it will help the situation. We filmed inside HMP Elmley in Kent, a prison that's been operating at almost 100% capacity.
Just so busy.
And even though we were escorted by experienced staff, you could feel the tension.
So the prisoner there was just presenting himself with scars on his body, and he's like, this is what prison does, self-harm.
Tight conditions here are having an impact. All of it fueling friction. And for staff, they're feeling it.
What's a bad day like? Could be anything. Could be fighting a fire, could be giving CPR, could be stopping a giant fight, a near-on riot, could be anything. Some days you come in and you've got all of that in one day, some days you've got none of it.
That might not be surprising to the government or the opposition, but still, hearing from staff inside, a reminder for those on the outside about how much pressure our prisons are under.
We saw a very powerful package on Sky News this morning highlighting this.
And so the government are releasing people to ease overcrowding, but a commitment too to reviewing sentencing policy.
This government believes in prison, but we must also increase the use of punishment outside of prison too.
A move welcomed by this governor.
I would love to see no custodial sentences under 12 months. I think if you could have the resource in the community to really deliver powerful community sentences, that has the power to really support true change in a way that is a lot cheaper for taxpayers.
The time we spent in prison was just a snapshot. Not the worst day they'd seen, but not without incident either. All of it reflective of a prison system that's spent months in crisis. And they're not out of it yet. Molly Malone, Sky News.
And let me just bring you some breaking news now on the death of Anita Rose, the 57-year-old woman who died in Brantham. Now we're hearing that a 55-year-old man has been charged with murder. On Monday, a 55-year-old man on suspicion of murder was arrested. We're now hearing that Rob Barkley, 55, of no fixed abode, was charged with murder tonight, and he is due to appear before Ipswich Magistrates Court tomorrow, Wednesday. And this is in relation to the death of Anita Rose, who was found critically injured by a member of the public on Wednesday, the 24th of July. Now, we have evidence tonight of just how close the U.S. election is, exactly 2 weeks from polling day, and with the Republicans and Democrats battling for any edge that they can find. In a moment, we'll hear how that battle has drawn in the Labour Party here. But first, we'll see the battle as it's playing out in one of America's key battleground states. Now, Michigan will be one of the closest watched contests on the 5th of November. Just over 10 million people live there, and 3% of them are Arab Americans. In 2016, Donald Trump was the first Republican to win Michigan since 1988, defeating Hillary Clinton by fewer than 11,000 votes. In 2020, Joe Biden took it back for the Democrats by just over 150,000 votes. Our U.S. correspondent Mark Stone went to the cities of Dearborn and Hamtramck and found traditionally Democrat-supporting Arab Americans who are changing their vote.
It is at a high school in Michigan, on the edge of Detroit, within the all-American experience, that you find the views that may help shape the future here.
We don't know what she's going to provide. We don't know what she's going to do. So I think it's just a safer bet to go for Donald Trump.
I'm actually asking people around me to see what they're voting, and the most person that I got is they're voting for Donald Trump.
The students here are first and second generation immigrants, and overwhelmingly Arab American. The teachers are too. Kassan Shahab is a pillar of this place, Palestinian by birth, American now to the core, and Trump is his man.
He's a straight shooter, I'm a straight shooter. But he has morals. I'm a conservative. All Middle Eastern people are conservative. Christians and Muslims, we are conservative people.
Frontier International Academy is in the heart of Hamtramck, the only Muslim-majority city in America. And there is no better place to understand shifting loyalties, changing politics. A landscape that will help mold the result of this election. Amir Ghalib is the Democratic Party mayor here. His office is a reflection of his political roots. But look what happened on Friday.
Why Trump?
It's a combination of two things, disappointment and hope.
It's about the real war in the Middle East, yes, but it's also about culture wars in America, too. And that's what's most revealing about all this. The shift to the right here is a consequence of a gradual leftward shift by the Democrats.
There's so much aggression and attempts to enforce certain values on the majority of this community. They just think of us as numbers in their pocket during the elections.
But do you not think that Donald Trump just sees you as a number in his pocket?
I requested, if he wants our support, I want to meet him personally.
And he came?
And he came, and he listened to me.
Up the road, a conversation which should alarm the Harris campaign.
2016, how did you vote?
I voted for Hillary Clinton.
2020?
I wrote in Bernie Sanders' name in the general.
And 2024?
I'm voting for Trump.
Wow.
Policy-wise, I don't like any of the Republican policies, to be frank, at all. I don't think I agree with a single thing.
Yet you'll still vote for him?
I will still vote for him, because one thing I hate more than all those other policies is genocide.
Inside the Yemeni-run cafe, Sarah Chabin is voting for the first time. What about the prospect of America's first female president?
It's just not enough for me to want to vote for her. Maybe if someone else came around and they had better policies, especially foreign policies.
And to underline the unease here, listen to this local Democratic Party leader with the startling conclusion.
And I could assure you that it's not just about Michigan. This is a nationwide phenomenon. I am worried. I am very worried. I think the damage is great.
And so it is then about much more than the war. It's the threat to their conservative values. They came to America for the freedom to live their life their way. It won't take many to swing this state and streamline the path to the White House. Here, through all the contradictions, they are swinging to Trump. Mark Stone, Sky News in Michigan.
Now, in an election this close, the parties are taking any electoral advantage they can. And tonight, that has embroiled the governing party here. The Trump campaign, via lawyers, has filed a complaint about what it called the far-left Labour Party, sending strategists to the United States to help the Harris team. Now, the letter says, I write on behalf of Donald J. Trump for President 2024 Incorporated to request an immediate investigation into blatant foreign interference into the 2024 presidential election in the form of apparent illegal foreign national contributions made by the Labour Party of the United Kingdom and accepted by Harris for president. Well, let's speak to Mark Stone at the White House tonight. Mark, an embarrassment, you would have thought, at least, to have British and American politics linked in this way just, 2 weeks before the election?
Yeah, it is embarrassing. Optically, it looks awful. I should say that it doesn't appear as though the Labour Party has done anything illegal. But as I say, it doesn't look good. It all began a few weeks ago when this post was made on LinkedIn by Sophia Patel, who is the head of operations at the Labour Party. And as you can see, she is calling for any staff, 100 Labour staff are going to America, she says, to help with the Harris campaign. Anyone else who wants to come and join them will sort your housing. It says, email me at labourforkamala@gmail.com if you're interested. Now, that post was very quickly deleted, but the damage was done. At the time, the Labour Party said that these trips are for individuals in a personal capacity, funded by themselves and in their own time, not organised or funded by the party, and that the accommodation is being arranged by volunteers campaigning for the Democrats. Look, it is true that there is precedent for this. Aligned parties, the British Labour Party and the US Democratic Party, it's not unusual in spare time for volunteers to come over because they are like-minded politically to try and help that campaign win. But when you consider the context, it is awkward. If Donald Trump wins the election, and he may well, then clearly it's going to be a little awkward because he's a man who holds grudges. He's going to have to, Keir Starmer's going to have to work with him as Prime Minister. So the governing Labour Party in the UK could have a problem with the man who might be in this place in not all that long.
Mark Stone with the latest there from Washington, D.C. Mark, thank you. Hundreds of women have come forward to give their accounts of alleged sexual abuse at the hands of Mohammed Al-Fayed. And today, one more of them, Bianca Gascoigne, broke her silence, telling Sky News how the late billionaire groomed and sexually assaulted her repeatedly when she was a teenager working at Harrods. Bianca, the daughter of England footballer Paul Gascoigne, was speaking to my colleague Sarah Jane Mee, and a warning, the interview does contain descriptions of sexual assault.
Bianca Gascoigne was just 16 when she landed a job at Harrods. Fresh from school, she'd been to the store on shopping trips with her parents, former England footballer Paul Gascoigne and her mum, Cheryl. She saw it as her ticket to becoming a fashion buyer. But she says soon after she started reporting directly to Mohammed Al-Fayed, the grooming began.
He used to tell me how much of a bad father my dad was, because he used to come into the store drunk, and he used to tell me that he was an embarrassment, that I should look to him as a father figure, that he could rely on me. And yeah, I felt a false sense of security with him early doors, because I used to go into the store with my mum and dad, and he used to come over, be very charming, bring us gifts, very personable. So I literally felt quite safe in his presence early doors.
From that point on, it got worse for Bianca. She says during their weekly meetings, he would grope her, force her to kiss him. She says she felt trapped and frightened. And one night, Al-Fayed offered her the Harrods Park Lane apartment to stay in before an early work flight.
He turned up at the apartment. To my shock, I just couldn't believe it. I was just gobsmacked. I was kind of very shell-shocked that I just didn't really know what to do, apart from, you know, he came in and then he sat me down on the sofa and, like, was obviously very forceful with, you know, the touching and the kissing. And I don't know how, but I managed to wiggle away. And I think possibly, you know that him knowing my parents, where I was working to someone so closely to him, maybe, I don't know, that might have saved me at that moment, but it was horrific.
Bianca recently had a daughter, and seeing other victims come forward, she felt she wanted to add her voice to empower victims of sexual assault. Bianca knows how difficult it is. She hasn't told anyone her story in 22 years. No one in her life knew what was going on, not even her mum and dad. She says the shame stopped her.
I was trying to deal with what I was dealing with, what was going on, because it was just so horrific. And I just didn't want to lose my job at that point. And he told me if I would say anything that I would lose my job. So I just really, you know, got scared. And at 16, turning 17, I just, you know, you think you know what's going on at the time, but you really don't. Like, I look back now and just feel very sorry for my 16-year-old self and wish I could protect her. I feel like I have to do this, like, and I want to do this, and I want to stand for the women and, you know, and just hopefully make any kind of change that in the future that my daughter wouldn't have to go through something like this, and it would be spoken about, and these predators wouldn't be able to get away with what they're getting away with.
Bianca Gascoigne there speaking to my colleague Sarah Jane Mee. And in a statement, Harrods said, "We are utterly appalled by the allegations of abuse perpetrated by Mohammed Al-Fayed. These were the actions of an individual who was intent on abusing his power wherever he operated, and we condemn them in the strongest terms. We also acknowledge that during this time, his victims were failed, and for this we sincerely apologize. While we cannot undo the past, we have been determined to do the right thing as an organization driven by the values we hold today, while ensuring that such behavior can never be repeated in the future." Israel's Prime Minister said tonight that he thinks the killing of the Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar might have a positive effect on achieving all the goals of his country's war. Benjamin Netanyahu was speaking to America's Secretary of State Antony Blinken on his 11th visit to the region to try to find peace. Well, there was little of that in Beirut today, as Israel's military continued to target locations it says are connected to the militant group Hezbollah. A warning that our correspondent Adam Parsons' report begins with the impact of one of those strikes.
Israel said it would attack Beirut, and it did. One missile brought down this whole building. It had already been evacuated. Now it was obliterated. In a matter of seconds, simply pulverized. Israel has attacked a series of targets in Lebanon, saying it's pursuing Hezbollah. This campaign is not slowing. This was the devastation near the Rafik Hariri Hospital, the largest public hospital in Lebanon. The airstrike came overnight. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 18 people died here.
I have a brother who is still under the rubble. His mobile's ringing. We're trying to search for him, but there's no way for a machine to get here. No one can help us pull him out. I don't know if he's dead or still alive.
But there is another hospital firmly in Israel's sights. It claims that this, the Al Sahel facility, conceals a bunker where Hezbollah has stored hundreds of millions of dollars worth of cash and gold. Sky News looked round the basement of this hospital today. No sign of the bunker and a flat denial from the staff.
These allegations are wholly unbased, and this is a hospital where people come to get treated. As you can see, this is an operating theater. people undergo surgery here.
Israel insists the bunker is here. It says it won't attack, but is watching how the Lebanese government responds. The American Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, was back in Israel once again, urging Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to seek a path to peace. But at the same time, Israel soldiers are pushing on. There's no sign of a let-up. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
There was little sign today of the controversy which has confronted the King in Australia's Parliament 24 hours before. Rather than heckled, he and Queen Camilla were feted at Sydney's iconic Opera House as they prepared to leave the country. There was one familiar face from home to greet them, the actress Joanna Lumley, and she told us she couldn't admire the couple more for taking on the tour despite the King's illness. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports now from Sydney.
He was the target of Indigenous protest in Canberra. But this display an easier watch, with a welcome from elders at Sydney's Centre for Indigenous Excellence. The conversations here about colonial history are difficult but important.
I'm just so happy that he came to the community because they choose to go wherever and he chose to come here. And we have to be respectful of that. And I'm happy to have him here.
Indigenous rights are a cultural fault line that continues to divide Australia. But this community barbecue was all about inclusion. And for the King and Queen, a turn on the tongs. It was a busy day in a trip that's been reworked to allow for the King's health. And here, a reminder, poignantly meeting two of the country's leading cancer doctors. The iconic Opera House would always provide a show-stopping background and a quick chance to see an old friend.
I couldn't admire them more, particularly as the King hasn't been well. And I think these days, which fly by for us because it's a moment, and you go, oh, did you see him? Didn't we look through our photographs and those children dance and those soldiers salute? They're on duty all the time.
The King's first tour to one of his realms mattered.
This trip's been the first real test of the monarchy overseas. No one knew how the King would go down under. But just look at the people here from the palace, a sigh of relief for them. This is a crowd-pleasing sight.
I saw his mother 70 years ago when she came, and I've come to see him today.
I think it's very important for them to keep visiting Australia because they are still technically our head of state.
I think it's wonderful. We have to hang on to something in life now because there's too many wars and there's too many things, so we need this to keep us going and have it in our heart.
Sydney Harbour put on a sparkling show and above a fly-past finale. A farewell to Australia, next stop Samoa. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Sydney.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the CEO of Total Politics Group, Mark Wallace, and the Observer's chief leader-writer, Sonia Soda. Among the stories we'll be discussing this on the front of the Telegraph, the headline, Alzheimer's wonder drug faces NHS block. We'll explain why when we're back.
This nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom.
Drop one bomb.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Tear down this wall.
Our very freedom came under attack.